Larry Elder is elected President of the United States. What do you do to change this country?
What we've done with our welfare state is we've incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility.
For young people, what do you think was a big issue for them?
That's what's so galling and appalling about the Black Lives Matter movement. Not only are its founders trained Marxists, their words, not mine, Marx believed in dethroning God. Marx also did not believe in the family. But what made the Black community strong was faith and family. These are the two pillars that made the Black community strong, and Black Lives Matter is antithetical to both those two pillars.
Famed radio and talk show host Larry Elder sits down with us to discuss the topics that are impacting our society today. We also dive in the state of California and the effects of racism. We also discuss what's going on with the youth of today and what the next generation will be faced with tomorrow.
It is your duty to still pick up your cards and play them to the best of your ability. And when you do that, when people see you doing that, they will help you. This is America. Take advantage of it.
So let's dive a little further and see why Larry Elder is a real American game changer. Well, I'm here with Larry Elder. Thank you so much for allowing me to stop by your house and joining my show, The American Game Changers.
I appreciate your having me.
So, last time we were at an event, I talked a little bit about how I feel that the more established generation, older folks, not saying you're old or anything, but the more established generation seems to have, for lack of words, not a lot of faith in the next generation. They don't believe necessarily they're ready for the tasks and the things that are coming. So my show kind of really focuses on trying to find young people that are doing great things, but also find people that are a part of establishment and try to bridge that gap. So my first question for you is, what was the first issue that got you involved and really got you wanting, before you're on radio, but what really wanted to champion? It's got you really involved in politics and got that fire going.
You know, Nick, I love to give you a hard answer, but I really can't think of one. I just always have been interested in making sure that people realize their potential. I had a Sunday school teacher named Mrs. Bailey, and one time she said, "Larry, why are you so driven? Why do you work so hard? Why are you so ambitious?" And I said, "I just want to leave the world a little bit better than the way I found it." And she said, "That's a wonderful answer." So I can't tell you that. My mother was very religious. We went to Sunday school every Sunday. My dad was a workaholic, and I saw my dad's work ethic, and I saw the way my mother believed in faith. And I think that was the foundation I had. But I can't give you some magical moment. I know that when I took economics in college, and I realized that much of the things I thought were wrong, I just kind of thought that there should be a minimum wage, that employers were so greedy, if you didn't put a floor below which they could not go, they'd pay somebody a dime. And then I realized from taking economics that that was not true, and that the minimum wage hurts people. So I've always been about the truth, and I've always been about using the truth to make people realize their God-given potential. So I can't give you a concrete answer. I certainly never thought I'd be in radio, never thought I'd be in television. I wasn't shy, but I certainly wasn't outgoing to the point where I thought I would be somebody that would be on radio or television. So my whole life has been a series of surprises to me. What I always wanted, Nick, was to be a writer because I wanted to communicate my ideas. The first thing I ever wrote was a poem about Sandy Koufax. And when the first thing you write gets published, there's a kind of an energy that comes from that. By the way, the poem was about Sandy Koufax, my favorite baseball player at the time. And years later, I meet Sandy Koufax at an event out here in Beverly Hills. It's a black tie affair. And I was able to ask somebody to take me down to his table. He stood up. We talked a little bit. I said, "Sandy, I've always wanted to be a writer. And the first thing, I'm not a writer now. I'm doing this, and this, and this. But the first thing I wrote was about you." And the first stanza went like this. "Koufax is on the mound. The game has just begun. He gets a sign from the catcher, and swish, strike one." Sandy put his hand on my shoulder. He leaned over and said, "Don't quit your day job." So I've always been interested in communication. I knew I was good at it. I remember being in grade school and they assigned parts to read from a play. And whenever I read, the kids didn't fidget. They didn't shuffle their papers. When other people read, people just kind of ignored it. So I always knew I had the ability to articulate things in a way that caused people to sit up and listen. When I was in college, big classes, maybe 100 people there, every now and then I'd raise my hand and I would ask a question in international relations, which is one of the areas I was interested in. And people stopped fidgeting and they listened. So I know that I had the ability to express myself in a way that got people's attention. My only question was how I was going to use this in a way that I thought would benefit people.
What issue do you think politically started really resonating with people when you were on starting radio? And what issues do you think really started where you started getting more listeners to you?
Hard to say about the more listeners part, but I've always felt that America, if you work hard, stay focused, you'll be just fine. This is well before Obama ever got elected, let alone reelected. And so this issue of people using race as an excuse for their lack of achievement, or people using race to scapegoat and to blame America for its past problems has always bothered me. I think today racism has never been a less important factor in American life, but for many people on the left, racism has never been a more important factor to them. And I think this is doing damage to our country and damage to individual achievement. So to the extent that I can puncture that false narrative, I want to.
Yeah. So you traveled around, and I guess you got to talk to a lot of people about these issues, about race and about this. For young people, what do you think was a big issue for them?
Unfortunately, for young people today, race is a far bigger issue than it should be. As I said, racism has never been less important in American life than right now, but a lot of woke people, young people, feel that it is. And they look at disparate outcomes. For example, the average black household has less money than the average white household, and they're attributing that to systemic racism. And it's not. In 1940, 87% of blacks lived below the federally defined level of poverty. 20 years later, that number had been reduced to 47%. That's a 40-point drop in a 20-year period of time. That, Nick, is the greatest 20-year period of economic advancement for blacks in history. That's before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, before the Voting Rights Act, before open housing, all because families worked hard. What we've done with our welfare state, Lyndon Johnson launched the so-called war on poverty in the mid-'60s. What we've done with our welfare state is we've incentivized women to marry the government and incentivize men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And as a result, we have a proliferation of kids entering the world without a father married to the mother. And this is not just affecting the black community. 70% of black kids enter the world without a father married to the mother, but half of all Hispanic kids do, and now 25% of white kids do. And the reason that 25% number is important is because in 1965, there was a man named Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Later on, he became a Democrat senator to New York, and he worked in the Department of Labor, I believe. And he wrote a booklet called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. And it was about the fact that 25% of black kids enter the world without a father married to the mother, a phenomenon he attributed to slavery and Jim Crow. But he said it's going to have all sorts of unintended bad social consequences if we don't do something about it. Well, fast forward, that number now is 70%, as I mentioned. 25% of white kids are now entering the world without a father married to the mother. It is the number one social issue in America, and neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are saying very much about it.
Would you say that would be a solution to a lot of the problems that we see is bringing back more of a traditional style family?
Absolutely. And that's what's so galling and appalling about the Black Lives Matter movement. Not only are its founders trained Marxists, their words, not mine, Marx believed in dethroning God. Marx also did not believe in the family. And on their website, Black Lives Matter, I think they've since taken it down, they attacked the nuclear intact family. But what made the black community strong was faith and family. These are the two pillars that made the black community strong, and Black Lives Matter is antithetical to both those two pillars. We need to rethink the welfare state. We need to rethink the dependency that it's causing, and we're not having that discussion. And all these things that we're talking about stem from that. Forget about elder. Barack Obama once said, a kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. We ought to be talking about why we've had a proliferation from 25% of black kids born outside of wedlock in 1965 to 70% today. And as I've said, neither Democrats nor Republicans are saying very much about it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, that point in general is like there's a lot of not talking about certain things.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that really is something that's dear to me is the idea of how do we bridge the gap between things. Is there a way to bridge the gap between Black Lives Matter and people that are not necessarily on board with everything that they're doing?
The only thing I can think of is to tell the truth and talk about the consequences. Black Lives Matter, this whole narrative that the police are engaging in systemic racism, it's getting people killed. Cops are pulling back. It's called the Ferguson effect, or more recently, the George Floyd effect. Cops are afraid of being accused of systemic racism, and as a result, they're not engaging in proactive policing. Bad guys know it. More people are being killed, and the people who are being killed are the very black and brown people that Black Lives Matter claims that they care about. The police kill more unarmed white people every year than they kill unarmed blacks. But I bet most people watching our video, Nick, will not even be able to name an unarmed white person who's been killed by the police because the media couldn't care less. If a cop kills a black person, especially an unarmed black person. By the way, unarmed does not mean not dangerous. Michael Brown was unarmed, but his DNA was found on the officer's gun, meaning he was trying to get the gun. When that happens, when a white cop kills a black person, in comes Van Jones from CNN, in comes MSNBC, which is what I call MSNBC. But when it's a white cop killing a white person, nobody gives a rip. And so there's a false narrative that the police are engaging in systemic racism against black people. I saw a poll that found the majority of self-described very liberal people, they believe that over 1,000 unarmed black people are being killed every year. Last year, there were roughly 4 unarmed blacks who were killed. And about 8 or 9% of the self-described very liberal people believe 10,000 unarmed blacks are being killed every year by the police. So this is the distortion because of the media, and the distortion because apparently people want to believe this false narrative, and it's getting people killed. A lot of people believe silly things that don't have any real-world consequences. This has real-world consequences because, as I said earlier, cops are pulling back, bad guys know it, and a young black man is 8 times more likely to be killed than a young white man. The number one cause of preventable death for a young white man is accidents, like car accidents or drownings. The number one cause of death, whether preventable or not, for a young black man is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young black man. That's why the cops are there.
Yeah. You talk about crime, and here in LA and all over, the crime rate has just been going up.
Right.
So my question is, and you've been fighting here for a little bit. You just went on a long campaign fighting. What is it going to take for, how long can people here in the state of California endure, some of these policies and some of this stuff before it's kind of a time to wake up? When does that happen?
It happens when the state, like a drug addict, hits rock bottom. Mm-hmm. The definition of rock bottom is, in my opinion, when a homeless guy takes a dump on your lawn, particularly if your lawn is in Beverly Hills or Malibu or Brentwood, or when the policies of the soft on crime DAs come to your home. And unfortunately, that is increasingly becoming the case. Just the other day, a 24-year-old UCLA graduate student working in a furniture store in a trendy area of LA called Hancock Park was stabbed to death by apparently a homeless guy who's, as you and I are talking right now, is still at large. We're going to find out very likely when they arrest this guy that he should not have been out in the first place. And that is a phenomenon of these soft on crime DAs like George Gascon, who's the LA County DA, who believes in cashless bail and basically believes that these poor criminals of color are victims of our society. Never mind that they disproportionately victimize the same black and brown people that people on the left claim that they care about. So also a music mogul, the wife of a music mogul living in Beverly Hills, was just murdered by a guy who should not have been out either. So increasingly, these policies are coming back to haunt the very elite people that pull the lever for the Democratic Party and support these left-wing policies. So when that happens, then I think, and only then, will California begin to reassess their policies. However, having said that, President Joe Biden is very, very unpopular, but there are a handful of states where his poll numbers are still above water, and California, until recently, is one of them. So what will it take for Californians to wake up? I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that at some point, like a drug addict, California has to hit rock bottom, and then maybe then people will rethink their assumptions. When I ran on the issue of crime. I ran on the issue of homelessness as well as other things, and I lost pretty badly. And I lost because all Gavin Newsom did was say, stop the Republican takeover. Barack Obama cut a commercial for Gavin Newsom. He said, stop the Republican takeover. Bernie Sanders cut a commercial, stop the Republican takeover. Elizabeth Warren cut a commercial, stop the Republican takeover. Nobody said Gavin Newsom is doing a good job for the people of California. So the hostility towards Republicans is a deeper concern to Californians than crime, poor schools, the fact that people are leaving the state for the very first time. So all I know is that we've not yet hit that rock bottom, but I think we will.
So I want to touch a little bit on how they painted you in your campaign, but I also, before I ask it there, I want
The black face of white supremacy.
right. I want to ask you a hypothetical question before I get there. And the hypothetical question is, snap my fingers, fair election, Larry Elder is elected president of the United States. What do you do to change this country? What is your first 100 days? What are the big issues that you would like to take on?
Well, I think the country is overtaxed, overregulated. I think the welfare state, as I mentioned, has incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. I would reverse those policies. I would get back to a foreign policy that emphasizes peace through strength, not strength through peace. Those are the kinds of things that I would do.
Yeah.
And I would change the rhetoric about race and racism. I think one of the reasons Barack Obama got elected is because people felt that it's about time that we put a fork in the idea that America is systemically racist. And Barack Obama won with a little more than 50% of the vote. But by the time he walked into the Oval Office as a newly elected president the third week of January in 2009, his approval ratings had gone to 70%. How does that happen? It happened because a lot of people who didn't vote for him still pulled for him. And I think they were deeply, deeply disappointed that over the course of his 8 years, he said that racism is in America's DNA. If racism was in America's DNA, he never could have been elected president, because the first time Gallup asked about whether you would vote for a black person was in the 50s, and the majority of white people said, hell no. Well, now fast forward, only a tiny percentage of people say they would not vote for a black person if they thought he or she was qualified. If I had a son, he looked like Trayvon, referring to the Trayvon Martin thing. The Cambridge police acted stupidly, referring to his friend Henry Louis Skip Gates, the Harvard professor, black Harvard professor, who had come back from vacation, forgot his door key, broke into his own home. An astute neighbor saw this, didn't recognize him as belonging to the house, called 911. Officer shows up very politely, asks this gentleman who's in the house to come out, bring ID to let me know you belong to the house. Instead of doing that, he played the race card and said, I'll come out if your mama tells me to come out. And then Obama embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. And Obama, in a speech before the United Nations, for crying out loud, said, you know, we have our own problems. There's a place called Ferguson, referring to the Michael Brown shooting. There's a place called Ferguson showing that we have our own problems. He invited Al Sharp into the White House over 70 times. So Obama played the race card when America assumed he would not. When Obama was running for the nomination, he wasn't yet the front runner. He was on 60 Minutes. And Steve Croft, the correspondent, said to him, Senator, if you don't win, will it be because of racism? And Senator Obama said no. If I don't win, it will be because I have not articulated a vision that the American people can embrace. I watched that interview, Nick, and I said, hallelujah. This is not what I call a victocrat, somebody who's blaming all the forces of evil on his own problems. That's the guy America thought they hired. The guy that they hired was the one who said the Cambridge police acted stupidly. If I had a son, he looked like Trayvon. We have our own problems. Who embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. And in my opinion, fanned the flames of racism here in America to the point where we have a lot of tension that we didn't have before. Believe it or not, the high point of race relations was during the George W. Bush administration, where the percentage of people who thought race relations were good or somewhat good was over 70%. By the time Obama got in, that number had declined to the low 40s.
I honestly do think President Larry Elder could calm a lot of the race tensions in this country.
Well, I do think, Nick, the president sets a tone.
Right.
It's not just policy, it's attitudinal. When Joe Biden got elected, I think people thought he was going to be a moderate who was going to do nothing more than at least tone things down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he's fanned the flames. He's referred to people that disagree with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act as akin to George Wallace and Jefferson Davis and Bull Connor. Bull Connor was the Southern lawman who sicked water hoses and dogs on black civil and white civil rights workers. He's made things worse. He could have set a tone and calmed things down. People follow the lead of the leader.
Right. So, in going back to what we were talking about, how they painted you when you ran for governor here in the state of California, and how they kind of painted that picture of you, what is your advice, I guess, to future leaders, to people that are wanting to get into, and what should they be doing to kind of fight against, the narrative that is created for some of the, for people that potentially want to run?
Just stand your ground and tell the truth. That's what I try to do. If you go on YouTube, you can find interviews I had with the LA Times and with the Sacramento Bee, both of whom endorsed my opponent when he ran, and both of whom editorialized against the recall. So they were enemy territory. But I stood my ground, I told them how I felt, called them out for their bias. Again, I think ultimately the truth wins. Ultimately, people want to realize their own potential. I believe the captain of the Titanic would have avoided the iceberg had he known the iceberg was ahead. Tell people, iceberg ahead, and they will take evasive action.
100%. I definitely agree with that. Last question, and this is like the question I like to ask everyone, is what is your message of hope for the young generation, for every generation? What is a message that people can look forward to for the future of this country?
Everybody in America hit the lottery when we were born on American soil. There are 7 billion people in the world. I dare say most of them would come here if they could. There's a reason that people from Cuba are braving shark-infested waters to get here. There are reasons people from Central America, South America, and Mexico are coming up here as illegal aliens, because they know that America is a land of the free, home of the brave. If it is a country where people are discriminating against you, where you can't make money, where you can't enjoy freedom, they wouldn't be coming here. We should appreciate the fact that we all hit the lottery when we were born on American soil. And you've doubly hit the lottery if you have a mother and a father who love each other and who love you. The best thing a father can do for his child is to love their mother. And if you have a father who's done that, there's nothing more you can ask for. Born in America, good family, realize your potential. And no matter how bad off you are, even if you don't have that, my father never knew his biological father. My father was thrown out of the house by his irresponsible, illiterate mother when he was 13 years old. Jim Crow South, Athens, Georgia, at the beginning of the Great Depression. You have a moral obligation. It is your duty to still pick up your cards and play them to the best of your ability. And when you do that, when people see you doing that, they will help you. This is America. Take advantage of it.
Larry, thank you so much.
My pleasure.